We're now going to take a look at how we can iterate over arrays to access each of the element properties in a list. And we'll look at two different ways. The first way is using a for in loop, and that will iterate over the properties of an object, i.e. an array. However, we're also going to then look at using a standard for loop because of a concern or a potential things to go wrong with a for in loop. Now, the difference between a for in and a for is that for in is going to specifically iterate over the enumerable properties of an object. However, it will not necessarily return them in index order. So, for example, let's say we want to loop over names and just output them to the console. Let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to say for, so this is a for in loop. We're going to say for something in something. So for name in names. And what this is going to do is for each loop, this will loop 3 times. It will give us Alex, Billy and Dale. So I'm going to say console.log name. So for each name in names, if you've worked with other programming languages, you might be used to saying something like for each something in something, or for each whatever. But in here we say for each name in names. So this will be Alex the first loop round, Billy the second loop round, and Dale the third loop round. So if we go and refresh this in our browser, you see that we get 0, 1 and 2 here. What we can do now is, instead of saying for each name in names, we can say names name. So what that will then do is output Alex, Billy and Dale. Now this doesn't necessarily output in index order, so the warning really here is that you may want to say something like, I definitely want these to be in a particular order, so I definitely want these to be in the order that I've specified them in array. So there's a slightly more complicated way you can do that, and that's just using a for loop. There is another way of doing things, which is a for of loop. This is part of the ECMAScript 6 proposal, but it's not necessarily something that will be included. So it's generally safer and a lot better to just go for a for loop. Now a for loop works like this, and we'll be looking at for loops later on. For loop, we say for x, or var x equals 1, for example. Now this is the initial variable, the setter that we declare to say, right, we want x to start at 1. Then we want a comparison. So we want to say while x is less than or equal to let's say 3 for now. We'll just ignore the fact that we aren't dynamically counting. Then we say x equals x plus 1, or we say x plus plus. So I'm just going to say x equals x plus 1 for now, because it tends to read and look a little bit easier as soon as you see it. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to console.log x, and we'll see what this looks like for each loop. So when I refresh, we get 1, 2 and 3. Now this is obviously no good because our array is 0 index. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to say x equals 0 and x is less than or equal to 2. So this is effectively counting from 0 to 2, or from 1 to 3, however you want to look at it. Then what we can do is, instead of console logging x, we can console log names x. So for the first loop round, this will console log name 0, which is Alex, then names 1, which is Billy. Now, rather than using a for in, we're guaranteed that these will be output in the exact order that we want them to be output in, because we're enumerating over a number, well, we're incrementing a number from 0 to 2, and we know that this will always be the case. It will always be 0, 1, 2, and we'll always get our items back in the right order. So we now know that we can do this using a for loop, and this is accurate. Now there's one more change that we might need to make to this to make it a little bit easier to, or a little bit more dynamic. Let's say we added another record into here, so Ashley for example. This will obviously only still output Alex, Billy and Dale, because this value here is not dynamic. In this case, what we would do is we would say names.length minus 1. Remember, names.length would be 1, 2, 3, 4 here, but we want to only go from 0 to 3 because it's a 0 indexed array, so it will be 0, 1, 2, 3. So names.length minus 1. And then what happens is whatever length of the array that we have, we always output the amount that we add. So we can add another record onto the end, and then names.length will now be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This value will be 4, so it will go from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if we go ahead and refresh now, that's automatically updated to include that new value. So that's two ways that we can loop over an array. The first way does work, but it doesn't always necessarily mean that it will be output in indexed order. It could be output in a different order, so it will always output the the second option, which is the for loop, will always output in the order that you actually want to output it in, because it's incrementing a number which is then being used to access the array index value.